She walked into my courtroom laughing on her cell phone. That was her first mistake. "Yeah, I'll be out in 20 minutes, she said, loud enough for the entire gallery to hear. "My lawyer says it's a done deal." I watched her end the call and take her seat at the defendant's table. Renata Moretti, age 34, third DWI arrest in 18 months. She had no idea what was about to happen. "My name is Frank Caprio. In my 38 years presiding over Providence Municipal Court, I've seen every excuse, every loophole, every attempt to game the system." But Renata Moretti thought she'd found something special, a technicality that would erase everything. Her lawyer, Vincent Castellano, stood first. Sharp suit, expensive briefcase. The kind of attorney who bills $800 an hour and promises miracles. "Your Honor," he began, pulling out a thick folder. "We move for immediate dismissal based on procedural violations during my client's arrest." I nodded for him to continue. "Always let them talk first. Give them rope." Officer Eugene Bartkowski failed to read my client her Miranda rights within the statutory time frame. Additionally, the breathalyzer device used hadn't been calibrated in 37 days, exceeding the 30-day requirement by a full week. Renata leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. That smirk again. The prosecutor, Gerald Winters, shifted uncomfortably. He was young, maybe 2 years out of law school. This was probably his first case against Castellano. "Your Honor," Winters said, his voice catching slightly, "while there may have been minor procedural—" "Minor?" Castellano interrupted. "These are fundamental violations of my client's constitutional rights." I looked at the case file. Blood alcohol level of 0.19, more than twice the legal limit. Security footage from a gas station showed her car jumping a curb, nearly hitting a woman walking her dog. But Castellano was right about the technicalities. On paper, at least. "Miss Moretti," I said, looking directly at her. "Please stand." She stood slowly, smoothing her dress. Designer label. Probably cost more than most people's rent. "Do you understand the charges against you?" "My lawyer says they don't matter anymore." Her voice carried that particular brand of confidence that comes from never facing real consequences. "That wasn't my question." Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand them. Tell me what happened that night." "In your own words." Castellano jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. My client doesn't need to—" "Sit down, Counselor." My voice stayed level but firm. "Your client isn't under oath. I'm simply asking for her perspective." Renata glanced at her lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. "I had 2 glasses of wine at dinner," she said. "Maybe 3. I was fine to drive." "Fine to drive at 0.19? The machine was broken. My lawyer proved that." I pulled up the security footage on my monitor, then turned it so she could see. "Is this you?" The video showed her Mercedes mounting the sidewalk, the woman with the dog jumping back, pulling her pet to safety, the car scraping against a fire hydrant before correcting back onto the road. "I don't remember that," Renata said. "You don't remember almost killing someone?" "Objection," Castellano said. "That's inflammatory and overruled." "Answer the question, Miss Moretti." She shifted her weight. "It looks worse than it was. The woman's name is Constance Palmer. She's 71 years old. She was walking her late husband's service dog." I let that sink in. "She submitted a victim impact statement. Would you like to hear it?" "That's not necessary, Your Honor," Castellano interjected. "We're here to address the procedural issues." "We're here to address justice, Counselor." I opened the statement. Miss Palmer writes, "I thought I was going to die. My husband's dog, Ranger, saved my life by pulling me back. I haven't been able to walk that route since. I'm afraid to leave my house after dark." Renata's jaw tightened. "I didn't mean for—" "You drove with a blood alcohol nearly 3 times the legal limit. What exactly did you mean to do?" Silence filled the courtroom. Even the court reporter's fingers had stopped moving. "Your Honor," Castellano said, "regardless of the circumstances, the law is clear. Improper Miranda timing and faulty equipment mean this case must be dismissed." He was technically right. The case law supported him. Commonwealth v. Jenkins. State v. Morrison. All the precedents lined up in his client's favor. But here's what Renata Moretti didn't know. What her expensive lawyer hadn't told her. "Mr. Castellano, you're correct about the criminal charges," I said. "The procedural violations are significant enough that I'm forced to dismiss the DWI charge." Renata's face lit up. She turned to high-five her lawyer. "However," I continued, and watched her hand freeze mid-air, "this court maintains jurisdiction over civil violations and contempt proceedings." "What?" Renata's voice cracked. "Your Honor," Castellano stood quickly, "my client hasn't committed contempt. She walked into my courtroom on an active phone call, discussing how she planned to beat the system. That demonstrates contempt for these proceedings and this court's authority." I pulled out a different file. Additionally, while the DWI charge is dismissed, the civil violations remain. Reckless operation of a vehicle, failure to maintain lane, property damage to city infrastructure. "But I thought," Renata started. "You thought you found a loophole. You did, for the criminal charge. But actions have consequences beyond criminal court. At 2:47 p.m., I made my ruling. On the civil violations, I find the defendant liable. Miss Moretti, you're ordered to pay $8,000 in damages to the city of Providence for the fire hydrant. You'll complete 200 hours of community service, specifically with Mothers Against Drunk Driving." "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. "I beat the charge." "You beat one charge on a technicality. But you still drove drunk. You still almost killed someone. And now you're yelling at a judge." Her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispered urgently in her ear. "Furthermore," I continued, "your driver's license is suspended for 1 year under the Civil Traffic Code. This suspension stands regardless of the criminal case dismissal." "You can't do that." "Miss Moretti, every word you say is being recorded by our court reporter. Would you like to add actual criminal contempt charges to your day?" She fell silent, but her face had turned red. Her hands shook as she gripped the defendant's table. "Your Honor," Castellano said, trying to salvage something, "the civil penalties seem excessive given that the criminal case—" "Counselor, your client has 2 prior DWI arrests. Both times, she used technicalities to avoid consequences. The first time, the officer didn't appear in court. The second time, chain of custody issues with the blood sample." I turned to Renata. "You've treated our legal system like a game, finding loopholes instead of addressing the real issue." "What issue?" she spat out. "You're an alcoholic, Miss Moretti." The word hung in the air. Her lawyer started to object, but I raised my hand. "This isn't a medical diagnosis. It's an observation based on evidence. 3 arrests in 18 months. Each time with a blood alcohol over 0.15. That's not social drinking." Officer Bartkowski, who'd been sitting in the gallery, shifted forward. He'd arrested her all 3 times. "Officer," I said, "is there anything you'd like to add?" He stood. "Your Honor, during the arrest, Miss Moretti told me she'd beat this charge, just like the others. She said her family's money would make it disappear." "Is that true, Miss Moretti?" She didn't answer. "Your family owns Moretti Construction, correct? The company with 17 city contracts?" Her eyes widened. "You can't bring my family into this." "I'm not. I'm establishing pattern and motive. You've never faced real consequences because you've always had money to make problems disappear." Vincent Castellano tried once more. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is becoming a personal attack on my client rather than—" "Your client nearly killed a 71-year-old widow, Counselor. This isn't personal. It's about public safety." I looked at the gallery. Constance Palmer sat in the 3rd row, her service dog at her feet. She'd been there the whole time, waiting. "Miss Palmer," I said, "would you like to address Miss Moretti directly?" The elderly woman stood slowly, using her cane for support. "I just want to know why. Why did you think your need to drive drunk was more important than my life?" Renata couldn't meet her eyes. For the first time since entering my courtroom, the arrogance cracked. I didn't think about it that way." "That's the problem," Constance said. "You didn't think at all." The silence stretched for 10 seconds, 15. There's one more matter, I said, pulling out a final document. Miss Moretti, in addition to the civil penalties, I'm issuing a court order requiring you to complete a 90-day inpatient alcohol treatment program. What? You can't force me into rehab. I can and I am. It's a condition of avoiding jail time for contempt of court. You can choose 30 days in county jail instead if you prefer. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered urgently. I could see him explaining her options, or lack thereof. This is insane, Renata said, but quieter now. I came here thinking. You came here thinking money and technicalities would save you again. They didn't. Not this time. At 3:17 p.m., she said 5 words that sealed her fate. I don't need your help. Those 5 words triggered something in me. 38 years of watching repeat offenders. 38 years of families destroyed by drunk drivers. 38 years of people who thought they were above consequences. Bailiff, I said, please take Miss Moretti into custody. What? She stepped back. You can't arrest me. The charges were dismissed. You're under arrest for criminal contempt of court. Your continued defiance and refusal to accept court-ordered treatment constitutes willful contempt. The bailiff, Officer Terrence Washington, moved forward with handcuffs. Vincent, do something, Renata shouted at her lawyer. Castellano stood. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Your client was given a choice, rehab or jail. She chose neither and demonstrated continued contempt for this court's authority. That's criminal contempt, Counselor. You know the statute. The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the courtroom. Renata's confidence finally, completely shattered. Please, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean. You've had 3 chances to mean it, Miss Moretti. 3 times you could have chosen to get help. 3 times you chose to find loopholes instead. Officer Washington led her toward the side door. She turned back once. How long? 72-hour hold for contempt. During that time, you can reconsider the rehab option. If you agree to treatment, you'll be released directly to the facility. If not, we'll schedule a contempt hearing where you face up to 6 months. Her face went pale. 6 months? Actions have consequences, Miss Moretti. Even when you beat the original charge. As the door closed behind her, Castellano approached the bench. Your Honor, I'll be filing an appeal. That's your right, Counselor. But your client will remain in custody pending that appeal. And Vincent? He paused. Next time you take a case, maybe consider whether helping someone avoid consequences is the same as helping them at all. He gathered his papers without responding and left through the main doors. The courtroom slowly emptied, but Constance Palmer remained seated. I stepped down from the bench and walked over to her. Are you all right, Miss Palmer? She nodded, patting her dog's head. I just wanted her to understand, Your Honor, what she almost took from me. I think she's beginning to. Will she really get help? I sat down beside her. Against protocol, but sometimes protocol yields to humanity. I hope so. The 72 hours in custody usually changes their perspective. Most choose rehab over extended jail time. And if she doesn't, then she serves 6 months and likely loses everything. Her job, her reputation, possibly her family's support. But sometimes people need to lose everything before they can rebuild. Constance stood to leave, then turned back. Thank you, Judge, for seeing past the technicalities. After she left, I returned to my chambers. My clerk, Anthony Romano, knocked and entered. That was intense, Judge. Think the contempt charge will hold on appeal. She openly defied court orders, discussed beating the system while in the courtroom, and refused court-mandated treatment. It'll hold. Her family's not going to be happy. Moretti Construction has a lot of pull in Providence. They should have pulled her into rehab 2 arrests ago. That evening, I got a call from Renata's father, Salvatore Moretti. He offered to donate a new wing to the courthouse if I reconsidered. Then he threatened to have me removed from the bench. Finally, he just asked me to help his daughter. I am helping her, I told him. For the first time in her life, someone's holding her accountable. 6 weeks later, I received a letter from Hazelton Recovery Center. Renata had completed 30 days of treatment and wanted to thank me. She wrote, I hated you for those first 72 hours in jail. I called you every name I could think of. But on day 3, alone in that cell, I finally admitted something I'd been denying for years. I needed help. You didn't save my life by dismissing charges. You saved it by refusing to let me escape consequences anymore." She included a photo from the treatment center, her with a group of other patients, all wearing matching t-shirts that read "Recovery is possible." She looked different, clear-eyed, present. 3 months after that, she appeared in my courtroom again, not as a defendant, but as a volunteer speaker for the MADD Victim Impact Panel. She stood at the same defendant's table where she'd been arrested and spoke to a room full of first-time DWI offenders. "I thought I was smarter than the system," she told them. "I had money, connections, and a great lawyer. I beat 2 DWI charges on technicalities. Then I met Judge Caprio." She looked at me and nodded slightly. "He didn't let me win on a technicality. He forced me to face reality. That moment, when the handcuffs went on, when I realized money couldn't save me, that's when my real life started." After her speech, she approached the bench. "Thank you, Your Honor. You did the work, Miss Moretti. I just refused to let you avoid it. My lawyer filed 12 appeals, you know. Lost every one." "I know. I fired him week 2 of rehab. Hired a new attorney who specializes in helping people in recovery navigate legal issues. Real help, not loopholes." "Good choice." She started to leave, then turned back. "That woman with the dog, Constance Palmer. I've been wanting to apologize properly. Do you think she'd see me?" Only one way to find out. 2 weeks later, I saw them at a coffee shop downtown. Renata, Constance, and Ranger the service dog. They were talking, really talking. Constance was showing her pictures of her late husband. Renata was crying. This case taught me something after 38 years on the bench. Sometimes the greatest mercy isn't letting someone escape consequences. It's forcing them to face them. Renata Moretti thought she'd won when those charges were dismissed, but she actually won 6 months later, clear-eyed and sober, finally free from the prison of her own denial. The system has loopholes. Good lawyers will always find them. But justice isn't about technicalities or procedures. It's about truth, accountability, and sometimes forcing someone to save their own life. Cases like this remind me why I became a judge, not to punish, but to interrupt the patterns that destroy lives. Renata came into my courtroom laughing about beating the system. She left in handcuffs. But 6 months later, she returned as living proof that sometimes losing in court means winning at life. What would you have done? Would you have let the technicality stand and dismissed everything? Or would you have found another way to deliver justice? Let me know your thoughts. If cases like this matter to you, I share news stories from the courthouse 3 times a week. Real cases, real people, real consequences. Next time, I'll tell you about the city councilman who tried to bribe his way out of a parking ticket and ended up exposing a corruption ring that went all the way to the State House. That's a story you won't want to miss. Until then, remember, justice isn't about winning on technicalities. It's about truth finding its way through the noise. Court is adjourned.